Have you tried Music to Code By yet? Well, why not? Here's a comment Joe left on the website. This is also great music to mow by. I like listening to music while doing yard work to help the monotony of it seem less tedious. This past summer, I started listening to these tracks while doing yard work, and they worked great. I could let the music play in the background without focusing on it, and it seemed to help me concentrate on getting through my tasks. Thanks, Joe. And now you can download the entire 13-track collection. That's over 5.5 hours of music to code by for only $39. Check it out at musictocodeby.net. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we are back in London, and we are at the ProgNet conference.
Indeed. And we did that silly thing last night.
Yeah, this guy named Dylan Beattie put together this crazy show based on Have I Got News For You, and it was called Have I Got .NET For You.
We are suckers for game shows. Let's be honest. You and I love those things.
Yeah. And did they record it, Dylan?
Yeah.
They did. So
the whole thing will be. I'm pretty sure they recorded it. Certainly, I
saw video cameras.
People with video cameras and stuff.
Well, we'll throw the link up on your show if it appears, because I thought it was pretty good.
It was the closest thing to Mondays that you and I have done in a long time, Mr. Campbell.
Yes, and I realize we have very talented speakers as our panelists. There's no two ways about it. But the say something funny on demand thing is a different skill.
Yeah,
we certainly have practiced it for 10 plus years.
Yeah, right.
And Dylan is prone to these sorts of things as well. Mr. Skeet, surprisingly quick.
He was good. He was very good.
Sharp. Of course, you pretty much wrote a whole section for him, tormenting
it's
weird C-sharp thing.
He is an outlier in the .NET community.
In so many ways.
Yeah. And the really strange thing is that C# is not his job.
Yeah, that's
right.
Great.
He has the right job. I think
you should see what he actually does for work, because that's just a hobby.
Well, anyway, before we get into the show and formally introduce Dylan, we have a little business. It's called Better Know Framework.
Awesome. All right, dude, what do you got?
This Better Know Framework site comes from none other than Mr. Bill Wagner.
Why, Mr. Wagner, a big fan.
Yes, and this is a project in the .NET Foundation, and it's called Worldwide Telescope.
Cool.
And this is a visualization environment that enables a computer to function as a virtual telescope, bringing together archival imagery from the world's best ground and space-based telescopes for the exploration of the universe. Worldwide Telescope blends petabytes of images, information, and stories from multiple sources into a seamless, immersive, rich media experience. And it also allows simple and direct access to observations of celestial objects and all sky surveys over the full range of electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah. That's going to be the tricky part.
That is the tricky part.
It's not just looking at it optically, but what does it look like an infrared? What if it looks like an X-ray?
Yeah, what do the radio signals sound like?
It's interesting you would say like radio signals sound like too, because that's all, you have to do stuff to data to make it sound like anything.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not going to go on. You can read more about this at 1482.pwop.me.
Awesome,
and that's what I got.
That's a great find. Love it.
Thank you, Bill. Who's talking to us, Richard?
I grabbed a comment off of show 1458, the one we did back in July, although it was one of the NDC Oslo shows because we did a ton.
Yeah.
With Ian Cooper talking about the .NET Renaissance, which I think is going to be very relevant in our conversation today.
Yeah.
This comment comes from Arthur Rump, who says, a good show as always. I wanted to touch on the, quote, leaky bucket problem you mentioned. Since I think we can do a bit more to get people completely new to programming into .NET. Mm-hmm. As a Microsoft technology, C# will never, of course, be a cool language to start in. I don't know if that's true.
I don't know if that's true either. Come on, we got Link.
Yeah. But I also don't think that we try to make it cool at all. Because of all the enterprisey people using .NET, most of the learning materials become a bit enterprisey too.
Yeah.
Thinking along the lines of jump starts with huge amounts of information, but very little examples. This is, of course, great if you're told what you have to build and what you need to know to build it. But for people who just want to get started in programming, it lacks a lot of guidance. I don't think C# has some flashy, quick get-started tutorial with only code and no PowerPoints, like most cool beginner languages I know. And I think I disagree, actually, because the new docs, new Microsoft docs, they've got lots of little snippets, like ready to run small test bits. So
Speaking of Bill Wagner,
exactly right. So I think it's gotten a little further along now.
Yeah.
And Arthur goes on to mention that he's got a blog post on this, which I'll include in the links that we might be able to improve the situation. And thanks for all the great shows. I've been listening since I knew what a podcast was.
Wow.
Well, we started before the word podcast existed, so thanks.
Thanks.
And Arthur, a .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Facebook and Google+. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet, but be patient because they have to go to space.
Little Louis C.K. reference there.
All right. Formally, let's introduce Dylan Beattie here. Dylan is a software architect, a conference speaker, and a musician based in London. He designs APIs and distributed systems based on Microsoft.NET and can be found speaking at conferences, hosting workshops, and helping to run the London.NET user group. Welcome, Dylan.
Hello. Good morning.
Yeah, how are you?
And hey, I just spoke at that user group.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 2 days ago. Oddly enough, I was in London.
What are the odds?
It's so
Strange coincidence.
It's amazing how that happens. Well, anyway, we always have a lot of fun with you, but you are an amazingly smart individual, and it shows in everything that you do. So we wanted to have you on the show. Talk about some of this stuff.
Cool.
Open source and C# and .NET and
Yeah.
a lot of stuff to talk about
No,
today.
there is a lot of stuff to talk about. I mean, it's to pick up on what you were saying a moment ago about, C# never being like a cool language with intros that don't have PowerPoint and stuff.
Right.
I saw something the other day that was really interesting. They're talking about Python. It's something I read on Twitter, and it said, the way to learn Python is not to learn Python. It's to find a problem you care about and use Python to solve it.
Right.
And that, I think that's a really interesting model to think about in terms of getting people into, programming, I think into any technical discipline.
Right.
People who get into carpentry do it because they're like, I need to make one of these or one of those.
Yeah, you start with a problem.
They start with,
that you
I need
care
somewhere
about.
to hang my tools. Okay, the first thing I'm going to make is a tool rack. Cool. Now I have tools. Now I need to buy more tools. Now I need another tool rack. And and I think programming is one of those things that there's so much stuff in the world now that we live in, and the way we work, the way we interact, that can be. People, it's quite easy to scratch your own itch, as the saying goes, just to build a little bit of code that does something that makes your life easier. And I think, there's a perception of a barrier to entry that really isn't there. There is a lot of complexity. There's some very high-level, complicated concepts. And that's something that we touched on in one of the sessions earlier this week about people who've come up through the trenches, We kind of cling to that stuff.
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, no, you need to know how to worry about port exhaustion and how to configure SSL certificates and all these kind of things. It doesn't matter anymore,
No, it doesn't.
Because I suffered, you must suffer too.
It's like, you have to know this stuff. And it's like, you don't have to know this stuff. You do. Now pay someone to fix it for you.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a cloud service for that now.
Yeah, the question is, when you're teaching kids, especially kids, because that's where you get them, right? You catch them when they're young, middle school, high school. And if you start off by doing all these esoteric exercises, that's no more fun than math class, where you're actually, that's how you learn math, is by, practicing little formulas and things like that until you can, think at a higher level. But programming, we used to start off with string handling and for loops and all that kind of stuff. And for what? What are you trying to do?
I think the first computer program most people in the United Kingdom probably ever wrote was the BBC Micro, BBC Basic.
Nice.
10 print, you smell, 20 go to 10 run.
Yeah, right.
And you did it to impress your friends in class. Because,
I made the
all the
computer do
schools had
something.
these BBC Micros.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, and it would come out, you smell, you smell, you smell. And then someone would work out how to do it without the line break at the end. So it would actually fill the screen instead of just filling it on. And that's it. The arms race had started. From that point, it's, straight up to Java versus C#. That's where it kicks off.
Isn't the intimidating part of getting started with C# Visual Studio?
Yes.
Because it's
and no.
just from an install perspective, this is not this. They ask you a bunch of questions you don't know the answer to if you're new to this.
Well, and the antithesis of that is there's a lot of other languages that aren't so difficult that you start off with a notepad or
right. Well, I did wonder if, as a beginner, you really need to start with VS Code, just because Studio is a tremendous commitment. It's so big. And
I mean, one of the things that I was looking at in preparing for the workshop I'm giving this afternoon is Azure Functions has there's the free trial. You get a month of free stuff.
Right.
But then there's a free trial that just does Azure Functions. You sign in with Twitter or GitHub or Facebook or whatever, and it gives you 1 hour. That's it.
Wow.
And you paste code and you click run, and you just made a thing running on the internet that anyone can connect to with a browser and do stuff. And it kicks you off with here's hello world, and it literally replies with hello world, and you can use a post or a get to put your name into it. It's like you didn't have to install anything. You didn't really have to learn very much at all. You literally click next, click accept, click go, and bang, you made a web function.
Well, but I wouldn't do that if you only have an hour. I wouldn't do your first hello world in Azure Functions, though. It might take you a while to figure out.
Their entire trial took less time than it took me to get through the license agreements to try and get Google App Engine going.
Right, but you can write code. That's what my point is.
Well, yeah. But, the point I'm trying to make is that there are a lot of, I think, perceived barriers. You got to install Visual Studio. You got to do this. Do I need a SQL local database? I don't know what that is. What if I don't have one of those?
Yeah, and that's the thing that worries me, thinking of, when we go to install Studio, having installed every single one that ever existed, you can answer the questions that are asked up front. Yeah. But a novice...
Have you seen that the installer for 2017 now has kind of, I think it's new for 2017. It's definitely something I noticed last time I did an install. Instead of giving you this huge long list of, do you want this? Do you want the TIFF image recognition filter runtime libraries? It's like, what do you want to do? And it gives you this grid of sort of capabilities. I want to build mobile applications for iPhones, and you tick that box, and it installs Xamarin and the runtime and everything.
Yeah.
You tick the box that says, I want to make Xbox games, and it installs all the stuff you need to do that. I want to make games that run on Unity. So it is sort of more of a what problem are you trying to solve than which features would you like from this list.
And starting to define that problem in the way that somebody who isn't living in the ecosystem can answer it.
Yep. Which I do like that.
That is smart.
And of course, you end up ticking everything because you're like, I might want Python. I don't know. Click, put that on. And now I have
as long as there's a disk space counter going on. It's like, let me tell you how many gigs that is.
Yeah, right.
And it ends up being a lot of stuff. And again, it gets back to docs. Like, I don't know, unless you spend some time in docs, you don't realize there's essentially a compiler running in the background. You can type code directly into that browser window, and it'll run it for you. So again, they're doing their best to get rid of any install requirement at all right up front to get started with a lot of this stuff.
And the fact is, you really can do C# in Notepad.
Yeah.
If you have a dare I say it, a batch file that will compile your code and run it for you.
Well, that's, when I first started using .NET, which was, the days of Visual Studio, .NET with no number on the end. It was just .NET was the version. We didn't, the company I was working for at the time was running on a shoestring budget for all kinds of reasons. And they didn't buy Visual Studio. So we downloaded the C# compiler and wrote files in TextPad and compiled them to make DLLs and run Hello World programs and stuff. It wasn't a particularly exciting experience, but the alternative was doing classic ASP and VB script.
That's right. And today now it's VS Code. VS Code is really quite good, and it's clearly free. Although again, there's a free version of Studio too, but small enough that you're just not afraid to install it.
Right.
It does have some fiddly bits. It does,
really?
Yeah, you still got to do the setup with the back end pieces to do your syntax checking and things like that.
Oh, that's if you're okay.
But it's reaching a point now where you could sort of sit somewhere. So one of the sort of classic, I think, entry points into this, someone going, I want a website.
Yeah.
And one, you don't need any programming now to make a website. There are a million ways. DylanBeattie.net, which is my site, used to be a thing that I wrote in HTML that ran on a Linux machine that I built out of hardware.
Yeah.
And I plugged in and I ran it. And then it got to, I used to host my own email on this thing. And that just became a slog. That was, such a thankless task, running a mail relay. And eventually I gave up. I paid someone else to host all my mail for me. And then it's like, I can't really be bothered with this server. So I and I started running a blog. I used to have Movable Type, which was the Perl blogging platform. And, I'd sit down to write something, and I'd end up hacking the platform instead of creating the content.
Right.
This is taking way too much of my time.
And I sort of reached a point where it's like, I'm not actually doing the thing I want to do.
Right. I'm not addressing the problem I sat down to deal with.
And, I'm fixating here on little details. It's one of those things, writing is hard.
Yeah.
And anything you can use to put off the point where you actually have to confront the fact you're trying to create something.
Yes.
So I can't write it. The theme isn't right. I don't like the font on it. And so I dumped it. I moved to
You're
Blogger.
sharpening pencils, aren't you?
I can't start. My pencils aren't sharp. And so, I just one day I decided, all right, I'm going to put the blog on Blogger. And shifted the whole thing across, started writing, and Windows Live Writer, which Galloway talked about in his keynote yesterday, which is a fantastic tool, Bang, that's it. I want to write a blog post. Okay. Type your blog post here. Publish. Done.
I find that when you're procrastinating to do something creative like writing a book or, I've written 2, and that was the biggest thing. What I found that is my to-do list with all the things that I knew I'd get to someday suddenly began to get smaller.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I'll rearrange the garage today.
The procrastination list.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, that's the way it goes. But open source development in .NET is now a thing. Of course, it's been a thing for a long, long time. But now, of course, so many pieces of the .NET framework are open, and it's a whole new world now. It has been a whole new world for a few years, but really it's amped up now, hasn't it?
It does feel, it's interesting. In the intro there, you said the .NET Renaissance.
Right.
And it's interesting how the definitive article has become attached to that since January of this year.
Yeah.
Because it started out as we need a .NET Renaissance.
Yes. But I think that
now,
was Ian's statement.
Yes.
And that I grabbed onto it and said, I want to do a show around this. And we ended up taking longer to get to do the show than I wanted. But he started talking about it at the beginning of the year. And a bunch of people jumped on with.
Yeah.
And it's funny how, what is a renaissance really, but a bunch of folks agreeing that now's the time.
Yeah.
Right. And so that agreement started, we're on board and certainly seeing it.
Yeah.
It is, and it's always a question of, did you make the parade or are you just walking in front of it?
Well, here's a clue to when you're talking about .NET to somebody who's uninformed, when you say, I'm really excited about .NET and C# and all the things, and they say, no, we don't do Windows.
Like,
okay, neither do I.
Yeah. Not a requirement for .NET.
Yeah.
No, it is.
For so long, .NET has been synonymous with Windows technology.
Yeah. And I think, that's one of the sort of interesting questions about all this is someone, just starting out, they want to build a website or they want to learn to code, as the mantra goes. And it's like C#. And they're like, I don't do Windows. Like, you don't have to.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't have any money. You don't need it.
Right.
It is now a free, open source, really
cross-platform,
well-supported modern development environment. There are language features in things like F# and Scala and Ruby, which are not in C# yet.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that they are coming. But as languages go, C# is the one that I enjoy working in because I find it very expressive, and it's sort of the way that it implements concepts like object orientation and anonymous functions. And, we've been having lots and lots of fun with some stuff we're doing at work with dynamics, where we're getting objects out of a database and they're static, they're entity framework, strongly typed. And we're like, we need to turn this into some hypermedia decorated JavaScript, JSON, so we can send it out on the wire. And it's like, there's this impedance mismatch. Because over here you have SQL Server, which is big and enterprisey and expensive and kind of...
And very orderly in the way it stores data.
And very, I love relational databases. I love the kind of mathematical purity of the relational model. I appreciate that mathematical purity isn't always the best solution to a real-world problem.
Yeah.
But on the other side, you've got the wild, wild web where anything goes. It's just all strings flying backwards and forwards. And it's the thing on the other end has to make sense of it. And so we've come up with a couple of patterns where you get the object out and then you're like, right, turn that into a dynamic object. So keep the structure, but strip off all the type constraints.
Right.
And then you can just stick stuff on it. Field names that aren't C#, CLR compliant.
Right.
But it doesn't matter because we're going to turn it into JSON and throw it away.
Right.
And it's brilliant. It's such a nice kind of the boundaries between the different concepts and the different ways of working. Relational data, fine. ORM, brilliant. Use it for little things, works beautifully. POCOs, domain objects, fine. Dynamic, serialize, JavaScript, gone.
Yep.
And it's very, very clear. When you say, we need to add a property or we need to add an indexer or something, it's very, very clear where you do that because there's a very kind of clean relationship between the different concerns.
Yeah. Hey, hold that thought, Dylan, while we take just a minute to hear from our sponsors.
This portion of .NET Rocks is brought to you by our friends at JetBrains. Hey, how often do you profile memory usage in your .NET apps? What if you could automate memory usage checks so that they're executed every time you commit a change? You can actually do that with .memory unit from JetBrains. .memory unit is a free unit testing framework for monitoring .NET memory usage. You write unit tests that check your code for all kinds of memory issues, and then run the tests on your machine or in a continuous integration server like TeamCity or VSTS, just like you do with regular unit tests. You can track how much memory is allocated, check memory for objects of a specific type to prevent memory leaks, or compare several memory snapshots in a unit test to see if memory usage is creeping up. Learn more and download .memory unit from jetbrains.netrocks.com, or just search for a package called .memory unit on the NuGet gallery.
And you're listening to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell here with Dylan Beattie. We're talking about C#. We're talking about open source development on the Microsoft stack, and Python.
Yeah. And all these language choices too.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking through what you said just before the break there, that coming out of the C# world or coming out of statically typed world is more of this. So do you want to know if I don't understand something, or should I just ignore it? That's really the line you cross. In the database world, in the statically typed world, it's like, I'm going to tell you when I don't understand something. But as soon as you cross over that line into the dynamic world, it's like, I don't understand this, so I'm just going to let it go.
I'm going to riff on it.
Yeah. Moving on. The stuff I do understand, I'm going to use. And the stuff I don't understand, well, just not going to talk about that.
And, the interesting thing there is, a lot of these things, so relational data, relational integrity, foreign keys, type checking, compilers, they're all different ways of basically deciding when do I want this to blow up.
Yeah.
When
are you going to tell me there's a problem?
At what point is it going to be that when I try and do an update table, it gets rejected by the query engine? Or am I going to get a phone call from someone going, your system doesn't work in 2 weeks' time? Because if you make a mistake at some point, maybe someone's going to catch it. Maybe no one ever catches it.
Right.
Maybe you're putting bugs in software no one's running. And,
Or more relevantly, that misplaced piece of data isn't important.
Yeah.
And so rather than stop everything to deal with it, to let it just be lost.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, because now we also get back to the upbringing angle. We've done this for a long time. We were hammered about data integrity, so we probably care more about this stuff than our customers do.
Yeah.
And that philosophy can be a problem.
And I think there, it's one of the things I'm very big on. Technology, I think, tried to solve a lot of problems by itself. And the whole startup model, all kinds of digital entrepreneurs and startups and things, basically like the people who do this for a living do it really badly. We're good at software. We can eat their lunch.
Right.
And, that raises interesting questions. There's been some really good discussion about Amazon acquiring Whole Foods.
Yes.
And people going, for the first time, we actually have a grocery food retailer that knows how to do software.
Yeah.
Because all supermarkets suck at software. Because they're not optimizing it for what you want. They're optimizing it for what they want.
Yeah.
And suddenly, we've got, Amazon coming up and, people talking about, well, you walk into the store, it's like, okay, we've optimized your shopping list. Go to this aisle, this aisle, this aisle, pick up 2 of these. Don't go over there. They're out of that. Use this instead. Thank you very much. And by the way, you don't even have to check out. We know what you bought.
Yeah.
It's all RFID tracked. We'll just, when you wheel your cart out of the store, we'll take it off your Visa card.
And how much longer before an Amazon grocery store looks like an Amazon warehouse?
Yeah.
Where you don't walk around the store. The store walks around you.
Yeah.
You'll go into a little yellow box, and stuff will simply start arriving at you. That everything that's on your list and things you previously ordered. And
what's fascinating about that?
I saw that on the Jetsons once.
If you go back to the sort of 1950s, I think it was Woolworths was the first store that allowed the customer to interact with the shelves. Because up until that point, there would be a store counter,
Right.
With a shopkeeper.
Yeah.
And you would go in with a list, and the shopkeeper would select all the items from the back of the shop and
Right.
wrap them for you and give them to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they're like, hey, we could get people to do this
Yeah.
instead. And they're like, no, they're going to run riot. They're going to steal everything. It'll never catch on.
Right.
And then they did that. And then, of course, we got the whole idea of self-service checkouts and, those infuriating
Speaking
machines.
of bad software, yeah, I haven't gone through a self-service checkout experience and I'm like, wow, that was awesome.
Yeah.
It's only degrees of hate.
Yeah. I do have, when it works, it's kind of, you go and you grab a sandwich and a Diet Coke, swipe, contactless card.
Yeah.
Like, not only is there no interaction, you can do it without touching anything.
Right.
I find that kind of, we've elevated to the point. But then there's a flip side to this.
Well,
which
before
is,
you move on, they in my town, they have a scan and bag.
Right.
So when you walk in the store, you pick up a little scanner, and then as you walk around, everything that you put in your bags, you scan. And if it's produce, you weigh the produce, it spits out a sticker, you scan it.
Right.
And then essentially you go through the aisle and just say, yep, here's my thing. It says, okay, here's how much you owe, and you're on your way.
Interesting.
It's interesting that you tend to get audited if you only get a few things.
Right.
But if you're buying, $100, $200
In a cart full of stuff.
in a cart full of stuff, they tend to not audit you. But every once in a while, somebody will come over, audit,
Yeah.
and then they look through your bag and they look at you.
Yeah, make sure you actually scanned everything.
Right.
What I find interesting in that model versus the checkout model where you're doing all the scanning in one location is like you are building up the scan over time so that your actual exit point is shorter. Mm-hmm. The workflow on this to me is interesting.
Yeah.
At the same time, that seems archaic to have a mechanical device, electronic device being carried with you.
Well, it only seems archaic because now there's an alternative, the technology, the Amazon technology.
And the RFID, the RFID approach. Tim Huckabee's working, the Internology Actus guys, where the shelf itself is smart and watching what you picked up, what you didn't pick up. So, it's just you start thinking about.
It's funny. You take a can of beans off, you hear cha-ching, and then you put it back, and you hear, what do you hear?
I don't know.
There are hotel mini bars that, for your convenience,
when you touch anything,
we will automatically deduct it.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a great book the book is called Dry. It's about a recovering alcoholic, and there's a chapter in it where he goes on this business trip, and the next day his boss gets the bill. He's like, what the hell did you do? You've got a $1,500 room, minibar bill.
Right.
Wow.
And he's like, I didn't drink anything. And the guy says, well, what the hell did you do? Take all the drinks out and line them up? And he's like, that's exactly what I did.
Wow.
I took them out, I put all the drinks, I sat there and I stared at them, and then I put them all back in the automatic minibar. And it's just, it's this lovely detail, one that the sort of insight it gives you into the character and, this battle with addiction.
Right.
But also into, that's exactly what would happen. I've been in hotels that would do that. Where you pick up some milk or some bananas or something on the way back, you're like, I can't put this in the fridge, or I have to move something, and if I move it, I pay for it.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
No, very, very cool.
But I mean, there's a downside. I was going to say, we now have this amazing, contactless payment and contactless everything. I was in Israel earlier this year. The hotel I was at had a gym, with lockers, and the lockers had no key. Nothing. There was no affordance whatsoever. And so I stood there and looked, and I saw, one of the people who was there, because they got signs, but the signs are in Hebrew, which I can't read. And I see this guy, and he comes up, and he's got the plastic smart card, and he just kind of waves it over a piece of this wooden door, and the door opens. I'm like, okay, so the smart card operated. I got a key card for the hotel, and I kind of spent about 2 minutes just waving this card over pieces of wood,
trying to figure out which one.
And then I'm like, I look so stupid right now. Is this the world we have created?
You are trying to cast a spell.
Yes.
Right?
Literally, I'm like, and it was like wall hacking in the old Dungeons and Dragons computer games.
Sure.
Where you'd walk down a corridor sideways
door.
looking for a secret button.
That's
there
right.
Would be two
looking
pixels.
for a secret door.
And I just thought, this is nuts.
Yes.
So I used Google Translate and Hebrew, and it said the lockers are for gym members only. I was like, all right, that answers that one. I could have been there a while.
The fact that your phone could translate Hebrew for you.
It's amazing.
It is really amazing.
Absolutely
we are
amazing.
living in a science fiction novel.
The universal translator.
Yeah.
It almost
Basically
works.
there. Now, was with my daughter, and then probably told the story, said in far East Germany, where they only speak German because they won't speak Russian, and whipped out the phone, translating the menu in real time, literally just rolling the phone down the face of the menu, and just gathered a crowd. They'd never seen anything like that. They're all this is a couple of years ago, and this stuff was brand new.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, yeah.
It's just there.
It's brilliant. You do get some fun little quirks, though. When I was at conference in Ukraine last year. And they did the conference program in Russian, and then there was a site somewhere that had machine translated it back into English.
Oh, yeah.
And Russian does not have the definitive article.
Right.
It doesn't have articles. So in English, it said Dylan wrote his first website in 1992. In Russian, that just becomes Dylan wrote first website. And back into English, Dylan wrote the first website.
Right.
On the conference speaker bio page. And it's like, I didn't write the first website.
Pretty sure that was Tim
That was
Berners-Lee.
Tim Berners-Lee. You've read books, you know. But, you know, you do get these little kind of weird insights into...
There are different languages for a reason, then they are different.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting, if you pass them back and forth between different languages, what do you end up with at the end?
Lose?
There's a game show there.
Yeah.
There absolutely is a game show.
I mean, one of the things I think is interesting, you know, are we going to end up with a human language which is, you know, like a form of English where the grammar has deliberately been modified such that machine translation is effective?
More effective.
You know, a sort of almost like a dialect of English that, you know, Google Translate is going to make sense of.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
Must be that happy time again.
Yeah. It's time to announce a new online grocery for psychologists. You can only buy bananas, crackers, and nuts. Oh, well. It's actually time to give away a D-Experience subscription from our friends at DevExpress to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM and state controllers like Redux. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. You can check it out and test it for free. It's on GitHub. But learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Michael Aldrich.
Congratulations, Michael.
Yeah.
Golf clap for you, sir.
That's right. And Michael just won the D-Experience subscription, a big pile of awesome from our friends at DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world. In every show, we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. But you have to sign up to win. And we like to ask our guests, Dylan, if you had $5,000 to spend on technology right now, what would you buy?
That's a very interesting question. So I have a specific angle now, which informs most of my gadget purchases, which is being able to play live music shows using only hand luggage.
What?
So, you know, I do a lot of travel for conferences and things.
Sure.
Most conferences have a party.
Yep.
And they have PA systems because people speak in big rooms.
Yep.
And there's a bunch of people, you know, standing around having a good time and drinking beers and whatnot. And so I have a little travel guitar that I take with me.
I see where you're getting at. You want a PA system that fits in a handbag, basically.
So, and, you know, so I started out with this little Steinberger travel guitar, which I basically bought because when you're on the road a lot, you get a lot of downtime. And it's nice to practice, you know. Airport, and I got that. Then I got a thing called an iRig, which is like a tiny little adapter that plugs your guitar into your phone and then your headphones.
Yep.
And you can sit in the airport and, you know, practice, and you can even like record and write songs and stuff with it.
Yeah.
Then I started getting carried away.
Okay.
So I found a little Yamaha, it's called a Yamaha AG06. It's a USB-powered mixing desk, 4-channel mixing desk, with a guitar effects simulator built into it.
No kidding.
So guitar in one channel, mic in the other one, backing tracks into a third, you know, keyboards or something into the fourth. Whole thing runs off USB, so you can power it off a battery, and then all you need is a stereo out into the power amp that they got in the venue.
Right.
And I'm like, how small can we go? And I literally, the other week, I went to a jam session with a friend of mine, and I cycled. And I had my Steinberger bass guitar on my back, and I had a little pannier on my bicycle with the mixing desk and one of those little boom audio speaker things.
Right.
Whole thing runs off USB. And, for a bunch of us sat around in his living room making music, it was fantastic. It was such a cool little
I'm going
setup.
to show Dylan a picture that I'm going to put a video, a link to.
Yeah.
This is a little battery-powered thing that looks like a Vox AC30 amplifier.
Yeah.
You plug it into your guitar, and on the other end, it's got volume, gain, and a headphone amp out. And this is what I bring this to my gigs.
Yeah.
Because typically I set up with a couple hours to spare. And then I sit down at the bar or wherever in the corner, plug this thing in, and limber up my fingers before a gig. But man, I'm totally down with that.
Yeah.
Totally.
So $5,000, basically give me all the tiny guitar stuff.
Yeah.
So one of those. And these are headset mics that we're using to record the show today. I've been looking for a lightweight headset microphone that is not wireless.
Yeah.
And literally, I've been to stores, I've looked online, I've searched all over the place. I did find one, they had one on Amazon, it was £20.
Wow.
And it uses 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi frequency. And it's a little tiny USB charged headset that weighs nothing with a wireless receiver. Problem is, it's got about 50 milliseconds of latency on it.
Oh, boy.
It's too much for music.
Yeah, you can't do that. It doesn't work. Otherwise, it would have been perfect. So, because if you got a headset mic, then you don't need a microphone stand because they're heavy and they don't fold down small.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and just guitars alone, right? They're a bit bulky. You need the travel guitar. You need this one that's deliberately trying to get to a smaller form factor. And the horror stories of traveling with guitars. Well, at one point when you were playing all over the place, Carl, you just started leaving guitarist places.
Yeah, that's right. And it was Las Vegas, actually.
Right.
And I wanted to do it in Oslo,
right?
Because that's $100 each way for a guitar,
transporting a guitar and risk to the guitar, and we were playing at least once a year, if not twice.
Yeah, so it's worth it to say, let's find somebody in Oslo who's willing to keep this in your closet for a year and bring it to the show.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it?
There could be a startup there. The one I have
that's
thought
not
often,
a bad idea, actually.
One I've thought
Uber
often,
for guitars.
Well, something I thought would be great would be a service where they come to the show after you're done with your band. They pick up all your equipment, they take it away, they keep it in a lockup overnight, and then they bring it to your house the next day.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, you finish the show, everyone's having a good time, there's an after party, and you're like, no, we can't. We got to
tear it down.
We got to, or you leave it in the venue, and they're like, yeah, don't worry, you leave all your thousands of dollars worth of equipment.
Or you put it in your car.
Or you put it in the car. Well, no one in London drives anywhere because you can't park when you get there. So.
Right, yeah.
And so I thought, you could do that. It's like they come along, they pick up all your gear, lock it up overnight, whole thing's insured, and then they bring it over the next day when you're sleeping off the after party.
The other problem with that is some gear is simple to do and simple to figure out. Some is like, and then you're like, where's that Firewire 800 cable that I need to record this,
Yeah, the other aspect of packing up is knowing where everything is.
Knowing where everything is. Yeah.
It's actually very personal, isn't it?
There's a thing, it was built for photographers and camera operators, where you put an RFID tag on every single lens, every housing, every microphone, everything. And then you just scan your bag with your phone, and it'll tell you if everything you brought with you is in there to go home again, which I thought looked
really
like
cool.
quite a neat idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Well, we had this nice little musical digression. I apologize for that.
And gear digression. We started off this conversation, I think, in some ways more talking about the struggles that non-developers have trying to get into this space. And I think there's another aspect, which is there's experienced .NET developers who are just trying to figure out open source, which I think we've talked about a few times.
Yeah.
But I don't know even how to open the conversation with an experienced open source developer about getting into the .NET space. I don't know. Did you bump into folks like
learn GitHub?
Situation?
So I think, one of the unique selling points now of the open source .NET thing is one code base that will run across multiple native mobile platforms.
Right. So Xamarin, really.
Xamarin, yeah. So Xamarin is, for people who have not come across it, it's C# that then compiles to native iOS and native Android. So you write once, run everywhere, like we've been saying for decades.
Well, at least two places anyway.
And Windows Phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Remember that?
But, I think that that and also the work that's going on now with .NET Standard, there's been a lot of noise and a lot of confusion. And I think the interesting thing that's been happening over the last couple of years is Microsoft trying to simultaneously be the big, stable, trusted enterprise platform. But also they want to move fast and break things because that's what the cool kids do. Right. That's the Zuckerberg ethos. Yeah. And they're like, well, how do we identify the things that we want to move fast and break and decouple them from the platform itself?
Right.
The stuff that has to be reliable.
Yeah, so the stuff that has to work works, and we can offer things like, long-term support on operating system platforms and, managed rollouts. And, there were the days when you'd have a patch Tuesday and it would be like, what do I have to install today? Oh, look, there's a critical vulnerability and there's also an upgrade for Windows Media Player.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, no, these things don't belong together.
Yeah, they don't.
And that's us dealing with it. When you deal with regular mortals, I appreciate Microsoft in the Win 10 model switching over to, you just got to be updated.
Yes, it's just going to
When's the last time you updated Chrome?
Yeah.
You don't get an option whether or not you update Chrome. The moment you close Chrome, it updates.
And I love that because that takes the burden off of me to now
think
do
about
something
it at
else.
all.
Yeah, I don't want to think about it.
As long as it doesn't break things.
Right.
And that's, you get back to, like, I think Microsoft, I'm putting my IT hat on here, with what they've done with Windows 10 is really interesting because they have that consumer continuously updated model.
Right. Yeah.
And then they have an enterprise. This is the enterprise build. You're off the continuous update, or you control the updates if you're in a bigger organization. So literally doing both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that same, watching Microsoft as an organization, and particularly as the role they play in the software development community, they have been very transparent about how difficult it's been to do that.
Yeah.
And I think they've taken a lot of flack for, U-turns where, .NET Core and then .NET Core Standard this and then .NET Core 1.6 and then actually this is going to become .NET Standard. And, while from my perspective, it looks like the ethos they started with was, we're going to build a really small cross-platform runtime that is minimal stripped down. So you get sockets and HTTP, but you don't get web client.download file.
Yeah, right.
And, we'll get that running on all the platforms and we'll open source it. And then the community can build the layer on top of that.
Right.
And of course, it created this chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
No one wanted to port their library to a platform with no users, but the platform didn't have any users because none of the libraries were on it.
Right.
And so, it would be lovely if that had succeeded and they'd somehow worked out a way of jumping that,
Well, and I feel like that's what Core 2 is about. And we've only just gotten Core 2. It's been weeks, literally, from when we recorded this. The Core 2 is finally, it's basically everything that's going to come across from the framework is across.
Yeah.
We have a lot.
I wonder how much of Core 2 in filling out those base class libraries was done by the community and how much was done by Microsoft.
This is the
That's
thing
a really
I think
interesting question.
has changed is I think the idea was if you build a platform, the community will then have a sense of ownership of all of the stuff that exists on that platform. Like NPM and Node.js and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to hold up NPM as an example of anything done right, but certainly
Let's hold it up as a cautionary tale to others.
certainly, one of the things for which NPM does not get flack is that it's run by the evil empire, and every time you use it, you're kowtowing to the man. And so, I think that didn't happen. And I think Microsoft were like, and, this is my opinion just based on stuff I read, conversations I've had. They're like, well, we're going to need to open source all the rest of the stuff people want. We're going to need to do system.net. We're going to need to do system.drawing. Hey, Jeff, do we need to do WinForms? Just like, no, it's all right. You can leave that out.
Well,
WinForms
that's
and
what they've
WebForms.
left out is the UI stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, it's the stuff that is
Windowsy.
WebForms was always very tightly coupled to IIS in terms of the programming model. And WinForms was, a shim over GDI Plus, which was a shim over GDI, which was a shim over the old, Microsoft COM32 runtimes.
Right, yeah.
So, they're very tied to Windows. There's no good way to make a cross-platform version
and,
of WinForms.
you talk to the guys from JetBrains who are, Rider is their cross-platform. It's a really fascinating product, actually.
Yeah.
Because what they've basically done with it is they've ported... So ReSharper, which is their plugin for Visual Studio.
Right.
They've isolated that in a headless .NET process that runs cross-platform using Mono, Xamarin, whatever the toolchain they were employing.
Yeah.
And then used I believe the Java interface components from their other cross-platform development tools to build a front end.
Yeah.
So you're basically running headless ReSharper.
Right.
That's talking to a Java UI with very little kind of logic. The UI doesn't know anything about C#. All that logic is in the back end. And, they started hitting some interesting quirks with that. Like there was this debugging component, which was on NuGet and probably shouldn't have been because license restrictions and stuff. And I was chatting with one of their guys and saying, what's the deal? He's like, well, basically to put debugging back, we need to implement COM on Linux.
Wow.
Because that's the interface
That's where it
used
lives.
to debug the running processes. And that's the thing that somehow ended up in the wild where it shouldn't have been and was used in the early builds of Rider to do debugging.
Right.
And they've made some mistakes. And I don't think it's that they didn't I'm talking about Microsoft now. They didn't make mistakes before. It's just you didn't find out about them.
Right. They didn't do them so publicly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they caught them. They cleaned them up.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting if you think about, and of course I'm the guy who just did the talk for you on the history of .NET, is that Microsoft has bounced back and forth about how visible, how not visible.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about a disaster of visibility, you talk about Vista, and the whole Longhorn thing. Like that was them trying to be more open because they had become the evil empire. And so they're trying to show we're just people trying to build software.
But under constraints from the U.S. government, too.
Yes.
They sort of had to ship by a certain date, or otherwise,
there were all kinds of issues around that.
Yeah, yeah.
But they got into a situation. The side effect of doing it publicly is you naturally overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah.
For better or worse. Where then you had a group of folks, specifically Windows folks, who says, let's do it the Jobs way, the Apple way, where you tell nobody anything until the moment it drops.
Yeah.
Right? So you can never overpromise because you made no promises.
Yeah.
The downside being. That's
Windows 8.
Well, what if you build the wrong thing?
Yeah.
And here we are now swinging the pendulum back and forth and coming back to, well, I want you to be part of the conversation, external community, so that we are making sure we're building the right thing before we finish building it.
Right.
And I think they still struggled in core.
Yeah.
Those updates to the original ASP core, they were brutal.
Yeah.
And they called them betas. And they weren't. They were alphas. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Because they were fundamentally breaking changes every time.
And, the thing I find interesting, once in a while, I kind of dabble in the waters of Node.js and that kind of stuff, which appears now to have become, even if you're not building Node systems, it's such a part now of the way the web expects you to do your build pipeline.
Right,
Grunt and Gulp and Bower and other things where I'm not entirely sure what it is they do.
But it's all this JavaScript that's not running in a browser.
Yeah, but I find, that toolchain horrific. I was trying to get Jenkins running locally because, GitHub pages, you can use it for static content or you can do something a little bit cleverer using Jenkins.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'll get a runtime for that running locally and then I can develop the stuff I need and then I'll just deploy to GitHub pages and it'll all work. I could not make it work. It's on Windows. They're like, yeah, well, this works, but of course this package hasn't been ported and this one has a dependency that version doesn't satisfy. And,
Right.
and I sort of thought,
We're a little spoiled, huh?
Well, it's you get the same challenges and the same problems, and the way in which the community's perception of those challenges is informed by whether there are shareholders at the end of it or not is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, is an open source contributor not a shareholder?
Yeah.
Right.
I think sort of bragging rights is a really good incentive as well. I mean, what better bragging rights can you have in 2017 than in the .NET Core when you when you could use a system string builder or whatever? Yeah, that was me.
That's
whatever.
some of my code. I certainly have friends who one of their bucket list items was to have a line of code in the Linux kernel.
Yeah,
to have made it through that vetting process and that piece of code lives on, that is important to them.
My first ever open source contribution, I got 1 bit into the ImageMagick code base. 1 bit. I was doing some stuff with Perl Magic on Windows, which was kind of a real esoteric corner case for them. And the binary serializer that it was using was sending stuff in ASCII encoding instead of binary. And I literally added .1 to the end of the invocation.
Wow.
And sent the patch in, and it got in. So I have 1 bit of code running in ImageMagick.
You have a Boolean. Congratulations.
I think that must be the smallest, other than the people who like pull requests where they just deleted an extraneous white space character.
Right.
Well, that would be a byte, actually. It'd be 8 times your contribution, sir. So... That's funny.
Yeah, it is very interesting to present that, and then you deal with the cultural differences.
Yeah,
right? Because again, I don't expect an open source person, and most of the ones that I've talked to, they're just not comfortable in the Studio IDE.
Yeah.
Like I'm used to assembling my own kit, kids. Like I want one of these and one of those, and you're trying to bring me all this stuff. Like this is too much stuff.
Yeah,
and so that's fine because there are alternatives, but the vast majority of documentation presumes Studio.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very challenging coming into the .NET space without saying Studio at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, now there just has to be multiple variations of guidance. There really just has to be, these. Microsoft has tried this before with the personas, right? Mort and Einstein and Elvis, exactly. Who are the people that use our products and what silos do they belong to, and how can we speak to them without offending the others?
So I always loved that for all the wrong reasons, the whole Mort, Elvis, and Einstein thing. And this expression rockstar developer, and you still see these adverts once in a while. Wanted rockstar developer ninja. I think it would be fun to apply for a rockstar developer job. Walk in drunk, bottle of Jack Daniels, trash the place.
wearing rhinestones,
carrying a cardboard cutout of yourself.
So, what do you do? And you're like, well, I haven't actually done anything good since 1986. But you wanted a rock star,
and here I am.
Because most the people who are selling at stadiums and stuff, they're not innovating anymore.
No,
a lot of the
I've been to rehab.
They're still out there writing and recording, but people go and see them for stuff that's 20, 30 years old.
Yeah, sure.
You want a trope, an archetype for someone trading on past reputation. It is rock stars. You don't want to hire those people,
Yeah. And I think it's doubly ineffective in the software world today because the models have changed so radically.
Yeah. Yes.
Like the 30-year-old musical hit, still a hit, right? And it's nostalgic and we love it. But 30-year-old software designs, look, dude, client server ain't going to cut it, right?
I know,
we build software differently.
That's actually a really interesting point you touch on because when you create software, the second you've finished it, it doesn't rot, it doesn't degrade,
right?
It just stops being current.
Right.
And if you write a song and look back on it 10 years later, you can still listen to it. Still the same thing. It's finished. Yeah. Any piece of code 10 years old that hasn't been deleted is a problem for somebody.
Well, we tend to think of code as disposable, and it should be fresh because that's fresh. It's full of new ideas and new technologies and all of this stuff. But we were I think it might have even been you who had a customer that's running some Visual Basic program, VB6. That is still to this day running and making millions of dollars.
It's us.
Yeah,
making millions of dollars for the
we have a Visual Basic application that was before my time. It was built on a contract that didn't confer ownership of source code, and a lot of the kind of key business processes that drove the company were baked into this application.
Wow.
And the application is coupled to the database schema, so we can change the database, but if you make certain changes, things stop working.
Right.
And so, we've had this long roadmap of how do we decompose this. And one of the great things about, things I think software development is getting better at is giving you so many patterns now to isolate things into components, services, handler, whatever you want to call it.
Microservices, the perfect
buzzword thing.
Example of that,
And it's like, okay, well, we know it's old, but we understand what it does. We know how to evolve it. We understand the responsibilities and the boundaries of this system. So the fact that it is old is no longer a liability in and of itself. Because the behavior of that component is well understood.
I mean, one of the questions there, when you talk about an app that arguably could be 20 years old now, is it is a manifestation of your business practices. Is a 20-year-old business practice still make sense?
Yeah.
Or are we actually constraining the ability of this business to compete because we have a codification of its business practice over here in an old piece of software?
Yeah.
Well, and in your case, the software is still making lots of money.
Well,
maybe it's not that I was talking to.
The software doesn't make
about
money.
The
business makes money.
Right.
The services we provide are still in demand.
Yeah.
It's just that the platform that we use to deliver those services is coupled to this piece of legacy, which gives us headaches.
Yeah.
It's not some magic algorithm. It's not like they wrote PageRank in VB6 and Google need to keep it alive because it's their sort of crown jewels.
But it is I think this is a time, and we're seeing this in AppV Next, that a lot of companies that have web forms applications are actually moving to .NET Core 2, thinking about containers, microservices, thinking about, okay, now it's time. It's time to move on.
So this is a crossing the chasm moment.
It is.
That these are not organizations that are leading edge, that want the newest bits. This is mainstream development where we care about reliability. These products are valuable to our organization.
Yeah.
And they are actually talking about not only new tools, but entirely new techniques. Like you said, containers. Like that's an entirely different workflow on how we're going to build and deploy and operate software going forward. Yeah. That is a fairly hefty jump.
Yep. Sure is.
Exciting.
And it's interesting, to look at the sort of the explicit and the implicit commitments that a company make when they invest in developing a piece of bespoke software.
Right.
Doing a workshop here at Prognet this afternoon about scaling. And one of the things I touch on is scaling is not just making the code go faster. It's recruitment, it's scaling culture, it's scaling working practices, it's all kinds of things. And the choice of platform is you invest in something that 10 years you're not going to be able to find developers to maintain that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. At the one extreme, there are platforms out there like Elm now, and I know companies or people, individuals, who have chosen Elm as their development platform because they know that anyone who applies for one of their jobs is going to be good.
Right.
Because there are no
the bar is so high.
Are no bad Elm developers.
Yeah.
And Paul Graham has written stuff about, if you build your code base on Lisp, you are not going to get any bad programmers trying to work for you.
Right. The fact that you know it and says something about you.
It's just a challenge of finding any
self-filtering.
Yeah, and there are not enough developers. There are too many companies building software that does not need to be built.
Yes.
You know how many airline applications I have on my phone? Every single one of them does the same thing. This is your flight. Here is your seat. Here is your boarding pass.
Right.
But every airline in the world has hired a team to build them an app to do that for them.
Yeah.
And it's like, can we just come with the airline seat allocation protocol and just make this a standard or something?
Right.
Could we just agree?
Imagine you needed a different email client for every company you want to communicate with.
Yeah.
And so that's where, all these app developers are working for those. And every bank and every hedge fund and every insurance company are like, oh no, our algorithm is unique. It's like, it's not.
It's really
It's
not.
the same as the guys across the street.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are not enough developers to keep up with the world's appetite for software.
Right.
And the ones there are, even, if you restrict it to the good ones, you're then you really start subdividing that by technology.
And I'm wearing my enterprise hat, it's like, if I'm looking for developers for a greenfield project right now, I'm going to look at C# and JavaScript because that's the biggest pool to tap from. Yeah, we're definitely going to have to deal with a varying in skill.
You see the Stack Overflow blog thing this week about Python being the fastest growing, the fastest growing language in wealthy economies, or some slightly odd qualifier they put on it
to filter the set down a little bit more. And I see the growth in Python in the data analytics space.
Yeah,
that's what that language is remarkably good at.
And IoT.
Yeah.
A little client. So what's next for you, Dylan? What's on your to-do list?
So there's a lot of stuff. All kinds of things.
How much time do we have? Come to the end of the show? You want me to list
So right
them all?
now, I'm going to go and do my workshop this afternoon, which is 3-4 hours on scalability and, scaling patterns and all kinds of, other stuff that I think matters if you want to go from writing little software to writing big software.
Yeah.
Which is going to be fun. We got a very good turnout for Prognet. We booked it as a 2-track conference. And I think there's about 150, 160.
Nice.
So I'm running a workshop which will probably have 80 people in it. So that'll be interesting.
That's cool.
So I'm going to make them self-organize.
Yeah, excellent.
And then, keynoting tomorrow, this talk I put together about the web that never was, which is, I love the history of the software industry.
Yeah.
And so, don't want to give too much away, but it's basically, what if Microsoft hadn't got MS-DOS? What if that had gone to digital research? What if WordPerfect had won instead of Office?
Wow.
So that when the web broke, WordPerfect were the massive enterprise software player. Because there's this little quirk in history. The first Windows browser ever was a thing called Cello.
Right. That's right. I remember Cello.
Yeah, and Cello was written at the, I think it was Berkeley Law School. It was one of the librarians working in a law school library who built it.
Yeah.
And, WordPerfect have always had this very, very strong relationship with the legal community and, the legal profession, particularly
they
in
were the
United
lawyers'
States.
word processor.
And, you're sort of looking at history and thinking it was so close to being, WordPerfect and Perfect Office is the de facto suite. And the first web browser for the dominant desktop platform came out of the legal profession.
Right.
Where WordPerfect already knew all the people. They had the customer base. They had the presence. They had the reputation.
Yeah.
It could so easily have been completely different.
Wow.
And so it's basically, the keynote is it's a sort of alternate history riff on that.
Yeah.
And it's lots of fun. I got all kinds of mocked up bits of clip art and fake product releases and stuff.
That sounds amazing.
And then off to Cambridge on Saturday, there's a DDD community event there. More .NET Renaissance stuff going on.
You're just a busy guy.
Then I'm going to Minsk next week.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to Belgium on holiday. That's going to be fun. And then Poland, Gdansk at the end of October for the Get.NET.
Excellent.
And then November, Moscow for .next, and then Build Stuff in Vilnius.
Excellent.
My little travel guitar coming with me all the way.
Excellent, man.
Nice.
Well, thanks for sharing what you do.
Thank you very much for having me.
Your
It's
thoughts.
been delightful.
That's been great. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC.